Hello again, and welcome to the living room. It's Independence Day weekend, and I'd like to talk about America and just highlight one thing that I really appreciate about America. One thing that makes America, I believe, a country that God designated to fulfill a very special role in the world. And that's the topic for today. And not just in the world, but in providential history. Last time we talked about, at least on Memorial Day, we talked about the need for understanding that we need internal controls and that would combat the need for external controls. By that I mean internal controls, morals, desiring to do what's right, devotion to God, or at least God's instructions. And this would create a moral conscience in people, and then the more that happens, the less need there is for police and force to just come down from the outside to clean society up. So that was a very mind-blowing concept for me when I was just reading about this, discovering this. But today, on this highlight of one brilliant thing about America, and the reason I think it's a nation protected and chosen by God, is related to that topic. Look, we would love to have a society where we're just completely in the internal controls, right? There's no laws. It's like a John Lennon song, right? Imagine there's no, countries and no wars and no nothing. There's no problems. We're all just wonderful heavenly people. And the founding fathers were grappling with this. Look, we know we don't want tyranny. We know we don't want heavy-handed external controls from a tyrant or a dictator. But let's face it, let's be realistic. We are ourselves not very great people on the whole. We have some good qualities, but we're not heavenly people. So we have a problem. If we just let go of all the rules and just live in a total open thing, it's going to be lots of chaos, and the bad people are going to take real advantage of this. So, long story short, let's admit we're not that heavenly, and that actually we need some kind of government. We need some kind of control. And how do we deal with that dilemma? Check out Madison. This quote really is just show. I think this is a God shining through a very brilliant intellectual mind. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. That's a good point, right? If we were all so heavenly, we wouldn't really need government. Second sentence here. If angels were to govern men, then neither the external or internal controls on government would be necessary, right? Like, if we could just elect Jesus as our president, we wouldn't need to control the government. We'll just let the government do what it wants. I mean, it's Jesus running the show. Well, we know that government, so far as we know, has never been anywhere near as Christ-like as we would have hoped, right? So that never happens. So here's what he says. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men. Pause here. He's articulating, look, we're not heavenly, but if we elect people into power to govern us, those people are not heavenly. And what are they going to do? They're going to use their position for more money, for more power, and eventually, as history shows, goes right into oppression, tyranny, dictatorship, authoritarianism, and so forth. So he's articulating very succinctly, we're not angels, but we're not governed by angels either. We're just all struggling with this fallen condition. So here's the next sentence. The great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and then in the next place, oblige it to control itself. So to rephrase, what he's saying is, let's admit we need some government, but then we need to control and restrain that government body as much as possible, because it's going to get out of hand. That's what history shows. It's going to get out of hand, and incredible evil is done by the tyrannies of the past. This is an incredible dilemma, right? How do we admit that we need some government but rein it in? And there's one element I want to point to, which was their attempt to do so, which scholars, lawyers, historians all over the world consider this brilliant and even a holy, almost like a revelation from God almost. I've heard some historians and thought leaders call it. And that is this one element, the separation of powers. Now, I know this sounds like a history class from grade school, and you might glaze over a little bit, but to create three branches of power pits the power against itself a little bit. And a historian I heard explained it so well in this analogy. Imagine three brothers fighting over let's say a baking sheet of brownies, right? And they want to cut up the brownies to make it so that they get the biggest piece. Well, if you let one kid just pull the brownie cake out of the oven and cut one off and then have it, he's going to get the biggest piece for himself, obviously, because he had all the say in it. But what our government did, or what the founding fathers structured it, would be like, let's say there's three brothers, and we made rules. We made it so that one brother got to cut the first line in the brownie, and then the next brother got to cut the next line, or cut the lines more to his liking, and then the third brother got to pick which piece he gets first. So in that situation, each brother knows, well, each of the first two know, well, we're in charge of cutting it, but we know that we're going to get the worst piece. So what are we going to do? We're going to make sure all three pieces are exactly the same. That way when brother number 3 picks, he's not going to get anything bigger than ours. He's going to get the same as us. And the genius of this is that they found a way to utilize our selfishness. Out of pure self-interest, the three brothers drive towards something that is fair and equal. That's a little mind-blowing, is it not? When I heard that, I was like, wow. That is genius. I mean, I don't think we can call it anything less than genius. Rooted in our selfish nature, the three brothers, the three branches of government are driven to come up with something that is fair and equal. And this is the way to keep the control, or keep the lid on the government, which has its nature to swell up and become ridiculous and powerful. So I'd like to hone in on this one idea because, it's really powerful. And a lot of times when people talk about the greatness of America, it gets very poetic and sentimental. And I mean, it is a beautiful country, and I'm not knocking any of that. But the greatness is not, the beautiful countryside, because there's lots of beautiful countryside all over the world. And then there's other folks that just want to tear America down, like we're just evil, we come from just slave owners, we come from violent people. That's all somewhat partially true, right? I mean, there's terrible history in American history. Slavery, for instance, should have never been permitted or existing in a country that Jesus helped build. The Spirit of Christ was really integrated and part of the founding of this country, yet somehow slavery was part of it. That should never have happened. But it did happen. And the treatment of Native Americans, also very speckled past, very checkered history with our early settlement. Yet I want to just zone in. What makes America special to God is not like, this group of people is just extra holy. No, it's that it began from a Christian spirit of we just want to serve God. We want to be free to serve God, which echoes even the Bible, actually. Very heavily echoes the Bible. Back in Exodus, the very first mention of free people, the whole concept of liberating and free people, started in Exodus, where Moses is coming to free his people out of Egypt. And right there, so easy to overlook. It says right there in the Bible, free my people so that they may serve me, or free these people so that they can serve God. The point of our freedom is to serve God. Without that freedom, we can't freely be devoted to doing God's will because we don't have the freedom or capability to act on God's instructions. So this freedom that the Founding Fathers tried to create was done by God to set the table to create a free nation that would then become a nation that acted upon God's instructions, that then could actualize a nation of love and devotion towards God. That's the actual goal and destiny of America. To preserve that freedom so that people can voluntarily serve one another and to serve God. Now, if we don't do this, if we don't rise to this calling, if we don't use our freedom for righteousness and for selflessness, then one day that door is going to close and we won't have the freedom anymore. That is how God's providence will move forward. And we have a little bit of chance left to turn America back to and hopefully elevate it to a deeper understanding of what it's all about, which is it's got to be in God we trust. It's got to be God first and foremost. So I want to go on to one last point. I know I'm just kind of going through this a little bit quickly. America is not just some kind of sentimental, beautiful country, even though I'm from here, so I have those feelings and those biases. But providentially, America is a very key place because American unity is actually a symbol, a microcosm, a model for what could then later become world unity. If you think about it, in those original days where the government was very small and the states had a lot of freedom. I mean, from one state to the next was almost like being in different countries, right? So rapidly, so wide-ranging and very different. And actually, that's still true to this day, right? If you compare like Connecticut or New York to Arkansas, it's so different. Yet they come together and they make the declaration that they are united. And we all use the same money that says, "In God we trust." That scares the living crap out of Satan. He hates America because America is that tiny little seedling of potential to be the model for world unity, not based on force, not forcing people to become borderless, not forcing people to come under some global, board of forums and international organizations that tell you what to do. Not unity by force, but unity by a common desire to trust God and to be a free people, based on those internal controls of wanting to be good and moral and conscientious people. So the American potential, the American idea is so dangerous to Satan's plan, which is division, conflict. Unity can never be possible unless it's this kind of like one world forced government under a tyrannical system, where everybody is forced to do what the authorities tell you is good. And that is absolutely not how God designed us. God designed each and every one of us to be titans of true love, to be masterfully divine, and to have a direct conscience connected to God. It's very different than the way heavy government-minded people see it. So I get it. I understand there's a lot of narrative and a lot of pain out there, and genuine hurt, genuine pain and anger about the problems of American history, the slavery, the violence, many decades of lawlessness in the West, people just wiping each other out and lots of violence, right? All those old Western stories, and along the southern border, I've read a bunch of novels about the southern border and all the chaos and violence along the southern border in the 1800s is just astonishing if you really start to read into the history of it. But the founding fathers understood something, that even though there might be some lawlessness here, even though this could be a very adventurous, risky project, the amount of evil and the amount of violence and amount of bad that can come out of some chaotic, ranchers and tribal warfares and schisms going on, that's nothing compared to what history has shown that the tyrants are doing. Tyrants and dictators and authoritarian regimes, those are the ones that inflict the most horror and damage on people. And that has come to pass. Look at Mao Zedong killing 50 million or more of his own people. Hitler and Stalin, just millions and millions of deaths, oppression, gulags, terrifying things. The worst evil comes from tyrants. That's been proven. And so, yes, the American, slave owners and land owners in the early days, they must have been very fallen people, right? Like so many of us have fallen conditions still on us. Okay, but we're not minimizing it. But there's an idea in this founding of this country that we are going to try to thwart the tyrant, so that we can, as a people, work it out, so that in our freedom we could get some kind of Martin Luther Kings and awaken ourselves and start to reform ourselves from the inside out. That was the hope. So the amount of thought these early founding fathers put into this country is just incredible. And that's why I think America is a special country and capable of fulfilling a certain role of unity and role of inner transformation to become people of true love and forgiveness, and to really fulfill and lead the way for world unity. That's what we need to do in America. It's our job. We haven't executed it yet. And we're in a very confusing time to be alive now, where it's almost just become so obscure because there's so much noise around this topic. But that's why I am unashamedly a very big fan of America. I'm so thankful for what the early settlers did, risking their lives to come here. And yes, there were many problems, but this dream is not about prosperity. It's not about, come here, start a business and get rich and then brag about how your kid went to medical school. The dream of America is that it could be a godly nation. It could be a nation where there's a unity that the world has never seen before. Whew! That's the dream. That's what God hopes we drive towards. So if you find yourselves a little bit more inspired about being thankful for this country, or at least thankful for God's protection over this country so far, I consider that a success. I hope that I can share my enthusiasm about this topic with you today, and go out there and celebrate our independence, and remember that America only exists for the rest of the world. The world is waiting for America to rise above the challenges and all the spiritual forces trying to extinguish that flame of liberty. But we keep it alive and we keep it burning brighter, and that's going to lead somewhere really beautiful for the whole world. And that's all for this time, and I'll see you next time. God bless.